The backstage area was chaos. Bodies everywhere. Men in posing trunks. Their muscles glistening with oil, their voices filling the small space with arrogance and nervous energy. It was 1975, a regional bodybuilding championship, the kind of competition where dreams were made or broken in a single night. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat in the corner, lacing his shoes. Nobody noticed him. That was the most important thing about this moment. Nobody noticed him. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody had heard the stories. Nobody understood the significance of his presence in that backstage area. To everyone else, he was just another competitor, just another muscular guy showing up to a show. But they didn't know. They couldn't have known. Because Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't supposed to be here. 3 months earlier, Arnold had retired from competitive bodybuilding. He had announced it to the world. 7-time Mr. Olympia champion. The greatest bodybuilder to ever live. He was done. Finished. Moving on to acting. This was supposed to be his past, not his present. But something had called him back. A regional show. Not even the big one. Just a warm-up competition. A chance to test his body. To see if he still had it. To prove something to himself that nobody else needed to see. So here he was, in a corner, lacing his shoes. While everyone else was talking, the voices echoed off the concrete walls. Competitive. Boastful. Young men convinced of their own invincibility. "I'm telling you, man," one competitor said, flexing in the mirror. His name was Tommy. 22 years old. Cocky. The kind of guy who had won every local show he'd ever entered. "Nobody's touching me today. I'm absolutely shredded." His friends agreed. Of course they did. They always did. "Dude, you're a machine," another one said. "Who's even going to be close?" Tommy turned to the corner where Arnold was sitting. He glanced at him for half a second, then looked away. Just another guy. Unremarkable. Quiet. Probably wouldn't even place. "There's that new guy," Tommy said, gesturing vaguely. "But he looks like he's never trained a day in his life. Check out his conditioning. Soft. Completely soft." The other competitors laughed. They didn't know Arnold was listening. They didn't know he could hear every word. They didn't care. Because to them, he was invisible. Arnold continued lacing his shoes. His face showed nothing. No reaction. No offense. No anger. Just acceptance of the moment. This was the thing about Arnold that nobody understood. He didn't need validation from these kids. He didn't need them to recognize him. He didn't need them to know his history. Because his history wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was what was about to happen on that stage. But they would learn. They would learn the hard way. Another competitor walked over to Arnold. His name was Rick. Bigger than Tommy. More confident. The kind of guy who actually had something to back up his arrogance. "You competing in heavyweight?" Rick asked, not out of friendliness. Out of dominance. Out of the need to establish hierarchy before they even stepped on stage. "Yes," Arnold said simply. His accent was thick. Austrian. Unusual. Different. It made him sound foreign. Out of place. "Oh," Rick said, nodding. Cool. "Well, good luck, man. You're gonna need it." He said it with a smile. The kind of smile that said, "I've already won. You just don't know it yet." Arnold nodded, said nothing, went back to lacing his shoes. What Rick didn't know was that Arnold had beaten him before. Not directly, but indirectly. Rick had watched Arnold's old videos, had studied his posing, had tried to copy his conditioning techniques. Rick had built his entire approach to bodybuilding on trying to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger, without ever realizing he was in the same room with the actual Arnold Schwarzenegger. The irony was almost too much. The backstage area continued its chaos. More arrivals, more boasting, more nervous energy. The closer they got to showtime, the more desperate the talk became. The more these competitors tried to convince each other and themselves that they were the best. A coach walked by Arnold, didn't even glance at him, walked straight to Tommy and his crew. "You guys look amazing," the coach said. "Seriously, you're all going to place today." They weren't going to place. Arnold knew that before the show even started. He could look at them and see what they didn't see in themselves. He could see their weak points, their imbalances, their lack of maturity as bodybuilders. They had size, yes, but they didn't have the complete package. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the understanding of what it truly meant to compete at the highest level. But Arnold said nothing. Here's where most people would have spoken up. Here's where most people would have said something, would have corrected them, would have asserted their dominance, would have made sure everyone knew exactly who they were dealing with. But Arnold had learned something in his years as a champion. He had learned that words were cheap, that boasting was for people who needed to convince others, that real strength didn't require an announcement. Real strength was quiet. Real strength was watching. Real strength was waiting. An official came backstage, started calling out numbers, started organizing the competitors for the lineup. Arnold was number 7, a good position, not too early, not too late, right in the middle where the judges could really see you. The other competitors were anxious now. The moment was approaching. The reality was setting in. Soon, all the talk would be over. Soon, their bodies would do the talking. Tommy walked over to the mirror one more time, flexed, looked satisfied, turned to his friend. "This is mine," he said confidently. "I'm walking out of here as champion." It was the kind of statement that seemed powerful in the moment, the kind of statement that felt true when you said it out loud. But Arnold knew the difference between confidence and reality. Confidence was easy. Reality was hard. Arnold stood up, walked over to the posing platform area, looked at himself in the mirror for the first time that night. He didn't flex. He didn't admire himself. He didn't perform for the imaginary crowd. He just looked, assessed, understood exactly what his body could do on that stage. And he knew he was going to win, not because of arrogance, but because he understood something that Tommy and Rick and all the others didn't understand. He understood that bodybuilding wasn't about being the biggest. It wasn't about being the strongest. It was about understanding the human body in its absolute most perfect form. It was about proportion. It was about symmetry. It was about conditioning. It was about the complete package. And Arnold had mastered the complete package in ways that these kids had never even considered. One of Tommy's friends noticed Arnold standing at the mirror, noticed him assessing himself, and something made him pause. Something about the way Arnold was standing, the way he was looking at himself, the confidence that came from complete understanding rather than youthful arrogance. "Hey," the friend said, walking over. "You ever competed before?" Arnold looked at him, didn't answer immediately, just looked at him with eyes that had seen things this kid couldn't imagine. Arnold said. "Yeah." "Where?" "Around," Arnold said vaguely. The friend waited for more information. It didn't come. Arnold went back to his corner, put on his posing trunks, continued his preparation, silent, focused, completely present. The official called the 5-minute warning. The backstage area erupted in final preparations, last-minute stretches, last-minute confidence boosts, last-minute prayers. Everyone trying to find the edge, the thing that would put them over the top. Arnold sat quietly, breathing, centering himself, going through the mental preparation he had done thousands of times before. Tommy was pacing, back and forth, talking to himself, psyching himself up. "Come on, Tommy. You got this. You're the best. Nobody's beating you today." He was trying so hard to believe it. Rick was doing his final pump, hitting his muscles one more time before going on stage, making sure every vein was visible, every fiber was visible, every bit of conditioning was on display. And Arnold was sitting, quiet, still, completely calm. This is the moment that nobody talks about. This is the moment that defines champions. Not the moment when you're on stage, not the moment when you're winning, but the moment right before, the moment when everything is about to change, the moment when you know something that nobody else knows. Arnold knew he was about to walk on that stage and shock everyone. He knew that Tommy was about to learn that confidence without substance is just noise. He knew that Rick was about to understand that size without balance is just volume. He knew that all these kids were about to have their entire perspective of bodybuilding shifted in a single night, and he waited for that moment with the patience of a man who had already won 1,000 times before. The official called them to the line. They filed out, Arnold in his position, number 7, walking out of the backstage area and into the light. The crowd gasped, just slightly. There was something different about this competitor, something that made people sit up and pay attention. Nobody knew why. Not yet, but they would know very soon. One of the officials backstage, a veteran of hundreds of shows, suddenly realized. His eyes widened. "Oh my God," he whispered to his colleague. Is that... Who?" his colleague asked. Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's competing." The colleague's face went blank. "What? He retired." "I know," the official said. "But that's him. That's definitely him." And suddenly, everything changed. The energy in the backstage area shifted immediately. Other officials started talking. The information spread like wildfire. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the legendary 7-time Mr. Olympia champion, the man who had changed bodybuilding forever. He was on stage, right now, in this regional competition that nobody thought mattered. Tommy, standing backstage watching the posing round, suddenly realized what was happening. He saw Arnold on stage, saw how he moved, saw how his conditioning looked, saw how he dominated the stage without even trying, and Tommy's face went pale. Rick was the same, watching the man he had studied, watched the man whose videos he had memorized, actually standing there in person, actually moving, actually posing, actually being everything that Rick had tried to become. "Oh my God," Rick whispered. "That's him. That's actually him." The other competitors stood in silence, watching the masterclass, watching what real bodybuilding looked like, watching the gap between themselves and the absolute elite. And Arnold on stage showed no emotion, no acknowledgement, no gratitude for the shock value. He just posed, just presented his body, just did what he had done thousands of times before, because he didn't do it for recognition. He didn't do it for validation. He did it because his body was capable of something extraordinary. And when a body is capable of something extraordinary, it becomes its own language. It speaks without words. When the posing round ended and Arnold stepped off stage, the backstage area was different. The energy had completely shifted. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something else. Respect, fear, understanding. Tommy didn't make eye contact. Rick didn't approach him. None of them did, because they all understood now. They had been competing against someone they didn't know existed. They had been arrogant in a room with a master. They had underestimated the quiet guy in the corner, and now they knew. But Arnold didn't say anything, didn't gloat, didn't remind them of what they had said earlier, didn't make a point of how wrong they had been. He just changed back into his street clothes, packed his things, and walked out of the backstage area as quietly as he had walked in. The judges announced the results an hour later. First place, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nobody was shocked. Not really. But the formality of it, the official announcement, made it real in a way that the posing round hadn't. Tommy and Rick and all the others who had been so confident just hours before now understood something fundamental. Confidence without knowledge is just illusion. Arrogance without substance is just noise. And the truly powerful people in the world rarely need to announce who they are. They just are. And years later, when Tommy would tell this story, about the time he didn't know who Arnold was backstage, about how he had underestimated him, about how he had watched the greatest bodybuilder in the world teach a masterclass on stage, he would end with the same realization. He never said anything. Not before. Not after. He just let his body speak for him. And his body said everything that needed to be said. That was the lesson of that day. That was what made it matter. Not the victory, not the dominance, but the silence, the quiet, the refusal to seek validation or acknowledgement, because true strength doesn't require an audience to believe in it. True strength is knowing exactly what you're capable of and being completely at peace with letting others discover it on their own terms. Arnold Schwarzenegger walked out of that backstage area as he had walked in, unrecognized, underestimated, and completely certain of his own power. And that certainty, that quiet, unshakable certainty, was more powerful than any boast could ever be. This is the story nobody tells about Arnold, not about his victories, but about the victories that happened in the silence, in the moments when he said nothing, in the moments when he simply waited for his body to speak louder than any words ever could. That's the real Arnold. That's the underestimated man who became unstoppable, not by shouting, but by being silent and letting the world figure out exactly who he was.